Because one of the things that alcohol does, it absolutely murders your ability to decode body language and read people. The reality is that like there's a much stronger correlation between high IQ and physical fitness than there is like anything else. There's what you know, and then there's how you speak about what you know. The how is what generates the engagement. If you only focus on the marketing and not on the writing, you'll be popular, right? But you know, will people take your content seriously? It'll be very difficult to grow.
When these guys tell you to open a spreadsheet and create all your stories and your epiphany stories and your obstacles and your bridges and all this stuff, if you actually do it, cause and effect, this will take an impact 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now. Before we start this podcast, I have one little favor to ask you. Can you please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week? Thank you. All right, dude. Let's kick off. Well, I appreciate this. I know a long time coming, I appreciate this. And I want to start with a quote from yourself, right? So, forget all the hacks, just do the work. Eventually your brain will get the message. How many years did it take you to get your brain to get the message to do the hard work?
When I think about it in terms of like how it applied to me, I don't think I ever had a problem doing like hard work, like things that are difficult or challenging. I think that's what drew me to boxing, for example, and even what drew me to my eventual degree path as an adult, which is, you know, physics is not an easy discipline, very challenging, very difficult. Where I had, I think, challenges was whenever I'd have to like accept just the path that it would take to become better. And even there, I don't think I had problems. I guess overall where it comes from is I didn't have issues with the idea, but I recognized that many people have issues with the idea. We live in a very great time in that it's very easy to survive. You don't have to, like, you don't need to be able to hunt or grow your own food. You don't need to even have to, like, live in a congested city versus a suburb because of the instantaneous and ubiquitous nature of communication. It's like everywhere, everyone's interconnected. And this is like, and then it's so clean and safe. Like, you know, sure, there are like your violent incidents that occur, but that's everywhere. As a whole, the world continues to get safer and safer. So all of this has created an environment where you don't really have to do much. Like, and not even to be entertained. I used to have a joke when I was younger. I know it was definitely when I was single because I didn't even think like this in the past 11 years. And I used to tell my buddy, I was like, all you need is Netflix and some wine, Netflix and a crib, and you'll be like the man. You know, you'll be able to like have girls or entertainment. And even if you don't want that, then you can be entertained by pornography and fast food and Uber Eats. Like, you don't even have to go to the grocery store. Like, we even removed that challenge. So we've removed all of these challenges, and that's not really good for, I think, developing your ability to persist through challenges, to go after what you want, anything like that. So I think I came up with the idea, or I said that because I was just thinking about how people have trouble with this. I don't think I have trouble with it, but I'm fortunate. You know, I'm an older millennial. That means it's a coin flip. It's just the generations make a big difference. I think, yeah, like I never discount the role that when I was born has played in everything in my life, for better or worse.
Man, and the thing with this is that I'm slightly younger than you. I just turned 28, right? And what I noticed is that
I'm only laughing because you call it slightly younger. That's funny.
there's a kind of saying in like the startup world, right, which is like 0 to 1 is the hardest, and that is true. But I think 1 to 10 can be the hardest because you have to keep it up. You have to do the thing you said you were going to fucking do. You have to put down Netflix, put down fucking porn, put down the junk food, and just repeatedly do the hard stuff continuously. So I think for a lot of people, spinning up ideas can be easy, right? You have a newsletter, it can be a community page, it can be a podcast. Going 0 to 1 isn't your problem, but staying on that course is. And that is a conditioning for sure, 100%. Because I think for me, it came from individual sports. You were a boxer, I was a 100-meter sprinter. I also played rugby at the time as well. But what I learned more from sprinting versus rugby was the fact that it's on you. Like, it's just on you, right? That if you win, congratulations. If you lose, you can't blame anyone. It's just you and 8 other dudes, right? that are on the track. And I think that kind of set me up well for when I was older. But obviously, the best place to be set up is, well, not the best place, but the one way to learn is through your upbringing, which of course like had many different challenges, which is interesting, right? Because now you kind of, you almost like laugh about it, use it as anecdotes, use it as storytelling, which is part of your writing. But that's hugely influential to you, right? And I want to actually raise a point on that too. So I saw from one of your, I think it could have been from your post, your podcast, that your mom was making up to $4,000 a year. What was that experience like?
Well, growing up poor sucks, man. It's not
4,000 a year.
Yeah, it was between like 4 and 7. Which even then was not a lot of money. I mean, and by then I mean in the late 80s, early 90s. So you adjust for inflation, it's probably somewhere in the range of 12 to 13,000, maybe not even that high. But as far as childhood goes, it's an interesting environment that is public housing, because public housing is kind of the last battalion, where you go before you're homeless. And a lot of people start there. A lot of people stay there. Subsidized housing by itself isn't a bad thing, but the people and the environment that it brings into it, it comes with a lot of rough issues, a lot of crime, a lot of we'll just call it general ignorance, and when you grow up in that environment, well, first of all, wherever you grow up, that's where you are going to get the most influence in your life, hands down. I mean, like, nature is really funny that way. The two things that make the biggest difference in our outcomes in life, where we grew up and our parents, are completely out of our control. So, with that said, I remember, I don't have like a lot of happy memories or anything like that from childhood. I don't have many memories like, I know obviously I lived from, age 0 to 14, but not till I'm 14 where I go to a school in a completely different neighborhood do I enjoy memories where I started to like my childhood and made friends and felt safe. And that was getting out of that place I was in. And then that was through no assistance from my mom. I had to figure out where I was going to go to high school. And that was the big difference, because, and this might seem like a random thing, out of line. So let me make sure I clarify this idea. So when in our city, in our area, and I think most places in the U.S., wherever, your schools are determined by where you live. Obviously you can pay to go to a school somewhere else, but if you're just going to rely on the public school system, then you're designated by zone. That meant that for elementary and middle school, when I went with the feeder zones for my neighborhood, I was with a bunch of other people from my neighborhood, other poor surrounding neighborhoods, and they brought with them their own habits and issues. So it was a crazy place. Really rough, just not an enjoyable time for me. I look back on that. And, fortunately at this point in my life, I mean, it's what am I, 39? So it's over, it's over 15, over 20 years ago, right? It's hard. It's over 25 now at this point. That's crazy. It's a prison sentence for murder. It's how I like to look at it. I love these murder podcasts and shows. I listen to a lot, and so I just think about that. How long that time goes, and it really. Most of the issues and habits that I developed in that environment, I've overcome through my own work. But you're still your base level of thinking, where you come from, that's was built there, and I don't know if that's ever able to be completely removed or whatever or modified.
The difference with America, I find, compared to definitely Europe for sure, is that there's a lot more extremes in like society, right? So, I spent a lot of time in America at the end of last year recording, and what I found is that there's two ends of the spectrum, right? My kind of like opinion is kind of split. It's like, one, it's like very, very difficult to get out of like that poverty, right? It's like if you're in that poverty, it's a vicious cycle, so on and so forth. Similarly with the food, right? The food is like really bad for you. There's a lot of really bad choices. But at the other end of the spectrum, there's loads of opportunity if you can get one leg up on the ladder, right? You can get into either, go to school, but that's probably outdated at this stage, or you could just get in and start working with entrepreneurs, start working your way up, get good opportunities. And then you could be someone like yourself, right? Like fully independent, break away from that system, be someone's healthy, fit, happy, and so on. But it's like in between, you have everybody else, but you just have such a wide variety on either side. That's kind of, you don't really experience that anywhere else.
That's that's a really good point. I lived in Portugal for not even a year. It's just probably like 6 months, and the biggest difference that I can remember, at least in this regard, is that there didn't seem to be like a concept of like wealthy and poor neighborhoods in the city. Like now in the suburbs, that shit, there were some places out there, and it's like the inverse of the United States, where the inner city is supposed to be rough and the suburbs are nice. In Europe, it's kind of different. But I remember thinking, as we move through different cities, that it's all kind of like there's less, like you say, the average might be about the same, but there's less variance. And in America, even if it's the same average, you're right. It's like, because the poor are really poor and the rich are really rich, and that wealth disparity.
I like that, man.
That wealth disparity.
It's variance. That's great way to put it. A great way to put it, man. It's just the gap in between, right? Which, it's the opportunity in America, though, right? I know we're going on a bit of a tangent, but that's like the opportunity that they push for you to go and play, and that's the game they ask you to go play, right? It's like, if you go and do the right thing, you get that space. Now, what I liked about you, what I've observed about you, which I think is very cool, right, is that like you had that handbrake turn into boxing, and then you went into physics, and then you went into your writing from there. What kind of gave you that kind of belief to be able to kind of reinvent yourself?
I don't know. I can, or rather, I know that's like not a great answer, but here's what I'll say. Boxing is like the first difficult thing I did in my life. And I didn't start until I was an adult. And so what that does is when you start as a kid, you just like, that's what that's like fun time, that you don't have many responsibilities, you can really dig into it and love it. And that's why like talent kind of emerges, or I think why a lot of talent emerges from childhood, and why a lot of people can only go far if they start something as kids. When you start something as an adult, you're juggling first just the stresses of survival, which is something you don't really have to think about as a kid. Like, I got to make sure I pay my rent because I got to eat. And then and I have to make a choice at the end of the workday. Do I go party or unwind, or do I go straight to the gym? Right. And so all of that, and then seeing what that paid off for me, how that turned out for me, that uh, it gives you a faith. Belief, faith are kind of interchangeable. But it gave me the belief in myself that I said, okay, all I got to do is make the right decisions, and I can and do the things along the way. So that's the process. So right decisions, and then follow the process along the way. If I do all that, then things are going to turn out okay. And they're going to turn out okay in pretty much wherever I want them to turn out okay. And I think the hardest thing for people in this regard, I make it sound simple, but it is. But there's one skill that makes a big difference, and that's the ability to look at the future and really treat it as a real thing. What I've learned is that people are absolutely off what this thing called the future. They don't consider how their actions, are going to create another reaction, which might create another reaction. Planning is very hard. Imagining that things are going to go wrong, that's very difficult for people. So all of this, I think I naturally, for whatever reason, excel at, and that's helped me make smart moves and stick with something. It's hard to stick with something when you're expecting quick results. But when you know it'll take 2, 3, 5 years, all right, then you're all right. Then you just go, all right, just got to put one foot in front of the other, and I'll get through this.
Yeah, man, you stick to the process, and that's why boxing or sport is a great way to give you that understanding. It's like you can only fight, let's say, 3 times in a year, just hypothetically. Therefore, I know that to get to a pro stage in 9 fights, it's 3 years. It's very logical. And to be honest, man, business is the exact same. I would literally say that it is in stages. There's different stages in your business and how you grow up and how you evolve as a person. But most people don't understand that, right? They don't think about it. Now, there's lots of different kind of ways to take that in terms of how boxing for you was a first vehicle. And I think this is interesting, right? Is that I think for a lot of people, you struggle with alcohol, and you had a lot of people struggle with alcohol for different reasons, right? But when you find that vehicle, it's almost like you commit to something, and then it's like all the other things subside. So let me give you an example. I create a lot of content there on alcohol, and a lot of Irish people comment on it and say, oh, well, what the fuck would I do if I gave up alcohol? But my take on this is you don't sit there and stare at the fucking wall on a Saturday night. You replace it. You either, you go out with your friends, you might play some sport or golf or some shit, but you replace it with something you enjoy. But for you, would you have said that boxing was the first vehicle you had to throw yourself into, even though you were struggling with alcohol at the time?
Yeah, and it's not even a question. I wish that I had started fighting earlier, but who knows how things would have gone. Everything happened. So everything happened the way it was supposed to happen, I think, and I'm really just extremely grateful that it did. But it was such a life-changing experience for me.
So let's get into the alcohol part of stuff. From your research in it, I know you've done a couple of talks. Is there any statistics you see of people, of what you found from alcohol, people struggling with it and whatnot?
On any particular topic or part of it, like the relapse rate or recovery, or what makes someone more likely?
Combination, anything that you found in your own research, even at the people that struggle, the percentage of people maybe that struggle with alcohol or people that relapse from it. So here's
some interesting things I've found just in my own digging around is and some of it directly relates to me. Some of it I just find fascinating, but probably for the wrong reasons. So if you look at kind of what the signs are of someone who is an alcoholic, either or someone who can't control, that they need to drink, otherwise they start going through issues, get the shakes, whatever. So they need to drink, or when they do drink, they binge drink repeatedly Um, and what I've found is that most people, or many people, I would say, at least in the United States, I can't speak for Europe. I know that Europe has a very different relationship with alcohol, and I can see that in the laws and the way it's sold and consumed. But in the United States, I find that many people who think that they're just normal drinkers are actually drinking at the alcoholic level. And one could ask, well, does that mean that the criteria is too sensitive? And I don't think it is, because if anything, I looked at some stuff. I was just talking to a guy about how they define binge drinking, because he made a post about having a bottle of wine with your girl and talking. Or someone said that, and he responded, we used to just call that binge drinking back in the day. And my first response was, a bottle of wine in a night is binge drinking? Oh yeah, like that's how normalized it is. That me, as someone who's 10 years sober, had that reaction. I was like, wow. So I think many people are heavier or more dependent on alcohol than they know it. And even if it's not physiological, it's certainly psychological. And that the number one worry that everyone has about drinking is like, what am I going to do when I stop drinking? And I'm like, well, you'll go like I get the question, so I'm never a dick about my answer. But really, you would socialize and learn to interact and talk to people without that as the background. But it's become so ingrained in our society that we don't even think about it.
Do you want to launch a podcast for your business, but you don't know where to start? Remove the stress, pressure, and all the overwhelm that comes with it by working with Podcast University. If you're an ambitious individual who wants to build your influence online, grow your own podcast, and also stand out from the crowd, Podcast University is for you. We help you with the strategy, equipment, the content, your guests, everything you need to create a top-tier podcast. If you want to learn more, check out Podcast University and start your podcast journey today. It's also turned into an aspect too, whereby, we go back to the weakening of general society, right? And this is more of a crutch. And I remember when I was younger, so I actually, you mentioned about Ireland or the Europe being different. Maybe Central Europe is much more they may have better rules, but definitely UK and Ireland drink like fucking crazy, right? And people drink at night, occasionally, continuously, and so on. So when they're younger and they're going out, I found this quite interesting, is the fact that it is a crutch. So whether you're out trying to date and get chicks, you have a beer in your hand. And I was number one fucking corporate person for this, right? I'd have a beer, cigarette, and it's almost like if you removed one of those variables, you'd feel awkward. And I heard Piers Morgan say to Chris Williamson recently, he was like, oh, but people are more interesting when you drink beer. And he's like, and Chris said, no, I would say the opposite. People are more interesting when they don't drink beer, but people pretend that they're interesting when they drink beer, right? Or drink alcohol. So it's almost and it's interesting because if you were to redo the entire process, would you have alcohol in society? No, right? Because of all the impact that it's had negatively and positively. But I think one of the reasons why it's still there is because there's so much fucking money in it. Same as cigarettes,
so
right?
Much money. And not only is there so much money, yeah, and you're right about the I don't know how we define that part of Europe, the British Isles, I guess, or Great Britain. That whole area, yeah, that's a very different relationship than where I've spent most of my time in Southern Europe, and I guess France, which is depending on the part of Europe you're in, or France you're in, is Southern or Northern. But that money it's not just the money, all right? That's a big part of it. But remember, in this country, we had one of the greatest natural experiments ever launched when we decided we would make alcohol constitutionally illegal. You couldn't. We just outlawed it, and it took it took about. I remember it's the 18th and the 21st Amendment, but I know it wasn't 3 years. But that's how much of an impact it skyrocketed crime. It corrupted the police forces of the country, the law enforcement forces, because if people can't buy it, that genie's out the back. Once you took it out, we can't put it back in. And in this country where we sprinkle capitalism on everything, and we actually don't sprinkle it, we try and drown our food. And I have an analogy about how capitalism is like salt, and we drown our food in that. So it only makes sense that they would figure out how to maximize the dollar out of alcohol, which means an incredible marketing campaign for it. A marketing campaign so good that we don't even question certain rites of passage, like how 21-year-olds think they have to go to a bar and have their first drink and black out or something. It's just absolutely mad when you think about it. But that's where we're at. And that's what I find interesting. Another thing I find interesting, this one doesn't relate to me, thank goodness, is when you look at the crimes, and I crunched these numbers myself, and I think the essay's still on my website. I may have taken it down. But when you look at sexual assault on women between the ages of 18 and 24, if you remove the presence of alcohol, like if that was the one thing that would change about the situation, if you remove the presence of alcohol, you would eliminate 95% of those assaults. And I thought that was insane because I was, seeing where the numbers took me. I was just making a point. I thought I would include this chapter in my book, but it didn't really fit. This was one of my self-published books, Sober Letters to My Drunken Self, just giving people emotional tools for sobriety. And I was putting this chapter together, and I was like, all right, this doesn't really fit, but it's interesting. So I just kept the chapter, and because of the research I dug up from the chapter, and more or less, if you get rid of, in other words, what I'm saying is those issues or those assaults were reported in the presence of alcohol, whether it was someone, one person was intoxicated or both people were intoxicated. And if you remove that, then what you end up with is like most of the assaults don't happen, in particular in that age range, because one of the things that alcohol does, and it's a double-edged, like not double-edged sword. It has two deleterious effects on this particular issue. Effect one is that it absolutely murders your ability to decode body language and read people. You just can't do it. The drunker you get, the harder it is to read people. And then on the other end of it, the drunker woman gets, when it's easier for her to get drunk, by the way, the more the less aware she is of how her body language is presenting. And the first thing that comes to mind when I say it like that is, she led me on. But no, it's the other way too, which is like she might think she's making it very clear that she's not interested, and it's there. And then it absolutely murders impulse control and makes you think good ideas, or makes you think bad ideas are good ones. And whenever I bring this point up to people, one of the big counter is, if you were drinking and you thought about the idea, then you wanted to do that when you were sober. You're just a perv. We should make sure these guys don't think that way. That's the counter to what you always say. There's a lot of people in jail right now for vehicular homicide. They weren't thinking about killing somebody when they were sober. It was when they were under the influence of alcohol that they took one bad decision that compounded into another one that led to the death of someone. That's how that works. And people think it's an easy way out to be like, okay, we're going to just focus on the behavior and say, because most guys, I'm going to say most, I don't know whether I'd say most, many, whatever. there are several men who drink and don't have this issue or have any of this thing come up. But when it does happen, we should ask ourselves, what role would alcohol play? And could we have mitigated that? Because look, we know it does. Like we know it causes so many other problems, and for us to try and ignore that one is incredibly dangerous. And when I say try to ignore it, they're actively what they're trying to do on campuses. It's not like,
well, it's trying to justify it, right? It's trying to justify their own actions, because, and not to say that they've done crazy shit, but it's a fact that they're part of that activity, and as a result, then, well, it's a fine, it's okay. This was a cause and effect of some other reason, and it's just full circle. It just goes full circle at the end of the day. But I think for a lot of people, like there is like that like moderation stage. Like I know whenever I post shit, one guy in particular, he was like, oh, it's okay to have like a glass of whiskey a month. And I was like, yeah, but most people don't fucking drink whiskey for the taste. Like most people drink it for what it does to them, right? I definitely know people that are my age don't drink it for the taste anyway, or just maybe when you're older, that's what you want to do, but not when you're younger, right? That's where I kind of view this shit. Man, how did you transition from physics into writing?
Yeah, no transition, man. Here's a little crazy stat for you. The overall highest score on the GRE is on average received by physics students. And the GRE, the graduate record exam, has a kind of quantitative aspect, math, and then the writing aspect. And so to score high, you have to score high on both. Physics demands that you're an excellent communicator of at least the ideas within physics. Like there's this myth that like people who are into like the hard brainiac sciences aren't good at communication, and that's just cope. Kind of like the way people try to make it seem like anyone who's in shape is dumb, and when the reality is that there's a much stronger correlation between high IQ and physical fitness than there is like anything else. But to speak about these topics in a manner to where not just like, let's forget about talking to people who aren't studying. You have to be able to communicate with your peers and be precise. Like if I said to you, speed up or slow down. Actually, I'll give you another example that's really funny. I used to have a teacher just kill me when I would say I'm going to turn up the volume to hear better. And it's like, you don't turn up the volume, you increase the sound. Like, and that's a really precise, it's, one of those things you'll think of. Or when someone talks about, speed versus velocity, they're two different things, but two different variations. To the average person, they're the same thing. But if I say one, I'm speaking about one thing. If I say another thing, I'm speaking about something else. Another one that's often used interchangeably is accelerating and speed. I mean, you have to know how to be precise with your words and then say as much as you can with as few as words as possible, but not miss out on the details. So all of this is writing training. I can look at my writing before school and after school, and I can see a quantum leap in ability.
So you're continuously learning to improve your writing, bringing this into your work. So how did you go about building the audience that you have and building the email list that you have? Because, you have like a very, I don't know, it's interesting to observe, like you have different products in the back end and you're growing really consistently across it. But it looks like that you have like that really nailed down framework in the back. It looks very familiar to me to like, Matt Gray, Dan Coe, Dakota Robertson, and it kind of has that kind of look and feel. So how did you think about like building your audience and kind of advice for people to build their audience?
I just spoke about what I knew, I don't do anything else really but that. And the like-minded people find you. Now, there's what you know, and then there's how you speak about what you know. The how is what generates the engagement, big time. but the what? I mean, there's just so many. It's just different topics, different ideas. What do I know? What am I trying to learn? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I doing? What are my insights? And there's a certain level of relatability and admirability, and you just continue to put it out there. When it comes to audience building, what people forget is that most people aren't going to talk about what they do. That's just, we think everyone wants to talk about themselves, and maybe they do, but they're not going to do it in a way that benefits someone else. When you can do that, when you can create content that people want to consume for whatever reason, whether they're entertained, educated, inspired, right? It's very easy. It's very easy, and it's fun, and it's useful, and it's a different way for a person to make a living.
So let's talk through that. So your first principle approach to this is identifying what you know, identifying how you can relay that message, but how it can help someone in their scenario. So if we were talking alcohol, for example, you're taking your personal experiences, you're relaying that, and you're relating it to someone who's on the pursuit of giving up alcohol.
Yeah. So there's there's lots of content on my site about, well, there was, and then Google decided that people who write about this stuff shouldn't rank as highly if they're not official. So I just
What is that?
Yeah, it's just an SEO thing. For a while, I was focused on SEO big time, and now it's like not my focus because there's just so many other ways to grow an audience.
To grow naturally through Twitter, right? That's where your main kind of focus is.
Well, LinkedIn right now is where the main focus is, and but any written platform, like I take my written content on LinkedIn and Twitter, I post it on Facebook, Substack. What's the other one that I mean? Oh, Instagram. Instagram is an amazing place for written content. One of the underrated gems. Like, people just don't really get how useful Instagram is for written content.
Man, that's very interesting because I saw the transition from like all the Twitter bros coming into LinkedIn, because I had actually started out on LinkedIn beforehand, and like a lot of people, like, I mentioned Dakota, who I know well, he was like, what the fuck? Like 1% of people on the platform post on LinkedIn compared to Twitter is like, 80% or some shit. So when you can write clearly and come to LinkedIn, you can just kill it, because it is filled with like platitude bullshit, like virtue signaling stuff, right? But forget about that, people. If you just focus on the content and just focus on helping people, it's literally just like one of the strongest platforms in the world to grow. And it's been like that for years, man. It actually hasn't changed.
Yeah,
it's been like that since like 2019. It's like people just didn't. People were like, oh, it's for jobs. Oh, it's for like virtue signaling. Oh, it's for like woke shit. And then I'd say about 18 months ago, people were like, all right, we're going to use it. And then they went over, and now, man, it's growing really, really quickly as a result.
Yeah, it's a great, the caliber of user may or may not be higher on average, but one thing that LinkedIn does extremely well is so to gain traction in LinkedIn, you need to be verifiable by other people, like your connections, your resume posted, whatever, right? All of that stuff like seems extraneous, but what it does is that it automatically removes low value people. And when I say low value, I don't mean like they don't make money or anything like that. Far from it. There's a particular class of individual who comes on social media and does nothing but fuck things up. Like, all they do is, they're just trolls. It's very hard to like you reduce the likelihood of crossing paths with that personality when you make a requisite for being on the platform some type of in-person connection. because there's a level of accountability that comes with it. Sure, I've encountered some anonymous or not accounts on LinkedIn, but they don't go far whatsoever. No one takes them serious. They look at you like, what? What are you? Why are you here? Like, it just feels out of place. Feels very in place on Twitter, and to a lesser extent, Instagram as well. LinkedIn is different. To do well on LinkedIn, or not even to do well, to even be recognized. Because I was just looking and be like, oh, this is a weird thing, and just block it. Like, it's just because it doesn't fit in LinkedIn. You can't come and then on top of that, here's another great thing that LinkedIn has. If you're not even remotely serious about social media, the barrier to signing up is not much higher, but there's just more steps you have to do to set up a profile. If you were just coming and making a lurker account or something, you're probably not going to do it. So what LinkedIn has done is, as long as it stays this way, I hope they don't make changes. I hope whoever the leadership is, they recognize the thing that makes LinkedIn great, and they don't change anything because there are more people coming over. But I love it. I just really like it there, man. It's just a different caliber. Everyone's like title and name. You can look them up. And when you look, when your face is out there, and when what you say can be tied back to where you work and do business, yeah, you tend to not be an asshole. It's just. I think that's much better, and I think that's much more. I just think it's much more wholesome.
Are you an entrepreneur who wants to build your influence and authority online? You may have tried some of the hacks and tricks, but none of it has worked. And it makes sense. 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 3. Of the 10% that are left, 90% of them don't make it to episode 20. That's where Voix comes in. Voix creates, manages, and grows your podcast for you on your behalf. If you've not been getting leads, not been growing consistently, you haven't found your tribe, and you don't know what to do, Voix is the answer. Don't just take our word for it. In the past couple of years, we've managed over 35 podcasts. We've also been able to generate over 55 million views with 500 episodes produced. And not only that, generating over $1 million for our clients in products, services, and sponsorships. So if you want to learn more about how you can build a great podcast and have it fully managed for you, schedule a call with me at Voix, and we will help you achieve your podcast goals. Yeah, man, that's the one issue I kind of had with Twitter. Is just like, anyone can say anything because they can put a fucking photo of Fight Club on their image, right?
And it's like, and what they can just doing?
Get away with it. But then there's that side of it, right? And I don't know, it's like, oh, like fucking free speech, like do whatever you want, whatever. But like you're still dressed up as a Fight Club character. And then there's the other side of it then, whereby like people are just blatantly making up numbers. Like there's no two ways about it. Like people are like, oh, like my business is I generated like $50 million for my client last quarter.
Yeah, and it's like
this isn't
like, how are we going to verify this? And look, I don't even care about verifying your numbers, or whatever. But the fact it's a selection pressure. That's all. And it's a great selection pressure. And that, okay, my face and my act or my background is here. Like one of the coolest things is that LinkedIn recommendation thing. Like that. Just that it's great. It's great. Someone else has to fill it out. It's a cool time.
Man, tell me about the book.
So the book is called Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. Business lessons on the business, not business. Boxing lessons in risk, relationships, and reality. And what I tried to do in the book is look at the through lines of the lessons I learned from boxing, from going back to school, from getting sober, from growing up in public housing, and there's a specific lesson from each point, and I draw on my experiences and research to make the point, to make the lesson, the value of the lesson.
Fuck, man, it's really. What was the catalyst for that? Because you've covered this stuff in other areas and other products you have.
Well, I always, well, okay, so I like writing, period. I think that's incredibly obvious to anyone who follows me for more than a day. All the writing platforms and stuff like that. But then there's the business aspect, and it's like, what are we gonna, how do we continue to move? How do we continue to grow? How do we get more fans? And a book was the next natural step. And then I said, all right, what can I create a book around? And one of the things I picked up real early about this whole book thing, because a lot of my platform was built from the first self-published book I had. And I've learned, if obviously there's like the general idea you want the book to be about. You don't want to discard that. But if you start with a cool title in mind, and then you come back and go, how can I support support this title of content? I think you're going to go a lot farther in terms of marketing than if you come up with a book and then try to create a title around it. And I know the copywriting bros do this a lot. That they'll write the copy and then kind of present it as this is the product you should design. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Certainly as a writer, at least. Anyhow, so that's where this came from. That's how where this book came from. And
man, that's the exact process with YouTube too. Like you reverse engineer from a title, and you can also do the thumbnail beforehand. A lot of my best episodes are reverse engineered that way.
Yeah,
and then you create the episode.
It's so cool, like to think this way, because it's attention centric. Like, yes, you make sure you got substance when they read or click through, but you got to be able to grab them first. Nobody give like one of the most sobering things for me in this writing game, and I never came into it with any preconceived notions, but this is still sobering, is that like no one gives a damn how good of a writer you are. Like your skill doesn't matter. Not only does it not matter, but if you're not careful, you'll mess around and get the wrong idea of what a skilled writer is. And you'll pursue that and wonder why you haven't gained any type of fan base or following. Because I don't care what anyone says. If you're not writing to build fans, followers, readers, go write a journal. Like, go write a diary. The fact that you're putting it out there means you want people to see it. So let's maximize that. Let's play to that. Like the skills are going to develop. They're two. In fact, they are two different skill sets. And if you only focus on the writing, or rather, if you only focus on the marketing and not on the writing, you'll be popular, right? But will people take your content seriously? It'll be very difficult to grow, because if I market a shit car to you constantly. And everyone who gets it is like, man, this car is terrible. Then eventually my marketing won't be trusted. Okay. So you need the writing skills. But on the other end of it, if you have the absolute best, and we'll even say car at that price conscious too, that everyone can afford, but no one ever knows about it. No one ever hears about it. No one talks about it. It just flies under the radar, and because they don't market it. And it's not a name, then it won't sell either. And maybe I used the cars was the wrong item, because there are cars that don't advertise, but everyone knows what a Lambo is. So the idea should still be clear, which is you need to be a good marketer and a good writer. And that means learning to think like a marketer. You already think like a writer. Okay, because by virtue of writing. But then all of these things, they have to come together. I just love it too. I don't even remember how I got on this the topic of marketing. That's how passionate I got about this thing. Right. It just came back to me. If you're not writing to build followers, if you're not writing to build fans and a readership, then you should be honest with yourself and go keep a private journal, a Substack, something. But if you're honest with yourself, you're writing because you want to be read. That's that's why we write most of the time. I'm not talking about your private journal. Yeah, outside of a private journal, anything put out there to be written, anything put out there written is to be read. That's what we do. So then you should learn how to make sure you maximize that part of the system.
How do you learn that?
How
do you get better at writing?
Well, getting better at writing is a matter of getting your writing in a place where it gets feedback. I do not believe in just writing every day, getting better. No, because that doesn't work. But like if I went to the box, like only writers are such an interesting bunch. Only writers will say some delusional shit like write every day, you'll get better. Like, no. Like I can go to the boxing gym every day. I'm not going to suddenly turn into Floyd Mayweather. Nah, if I had Floyd Mayweather's coach, all right, I got a much greater chance. What do I say this about writing? You got to have a writing coach, someone to push back against you, get some feedback. This is another reason why you should be publishing in public, because at the worst case scenario, you get some trolls and they attack your writing and you sharpen it up. But either way, if you don't have feedback, it can't improve. Whether you have an editor, someone who reads over it to catch different typos, and then you come back and read and go, oh, that sucks. All right. That's like the first way to get better at writing. The second way to get better at writing is you want to read other people's stuff and that's been edited. So published. Typically anything that's made it to like publishing by a big house, that's been professionally edited. And there's a lot to say about like people like to shit on the traditional book publishing process. I again consider that a form of cope, because if I'm looking at a book that's been professionally published, that means they put money behind it. Once you understand the business structure, it's basically venture capital. They want this thing to succeed. So they have created the best, most polished product they could. So if you look through that writing, you're going to see polish and how it should look. And you should aim to emulate that in your own writing to lessen the gap between your first draft and the final draft, and improve the quality. So those two things right there, reading professionally edited work and getting feedback on your work. As far as the marketing side goes, pretty much the same idea, maybe with some slight twists and caveats. The marketing, you learn copywriting, because, and when I say learn copywriting, I don't mean, again, don't just go out there writing copy and just hope it's going to sell something. No, study some masters, man. Study some books. Learn human psychology as well, because you got to understand how people react to stuff. If you for example, if you don't understand cognitive bias, and the bias in this particular instance we'll use is loss aversion bias. If you don't understand how that plays into getting people to pay attention to things, then not only will you suffer for it, you'll likely be taken advantage of it, or be taken advantage of by it when you read like headlines. And loss aversion bias is the idea that we feel a loss greater than a gain of equal amount, even though it should be the same. Losing $5 hurts a hell of a lot more than making $5. It hurts about, and that's significant. That means we pay more attention to negativity. We pay more attention to things that can hurt us. This is why the news is the news. If you look at the way headlines are structured, you'll pick something up. If you're not one for formal study and you like to absorb by osmosis, that's a great way to study how to make titles. Look at the headline titles of the most viewed news stories, the most clickbait, baby. The goal isn't to create clickbait, but the goal is to understand why this is getting so much engagement, which is what you're trying to achieve. And you're right, more engagement.
Man, that's so fucking valuable. And what's interesting there is one of the podcasts we run in our company is an investing podcast. And I'll always benchmark off like CNBC, CNN, like all these big dogs, because they just write so much divisive content. And it's not for you to write divisive content. It's to see why that works and why it doesn't work. And I think the beautiful way that I see this and play out a lot of times is that when you read and you read like Cash Advertising, for instance. Cash Advertising is a great book on this. It's like you read and then implement, but you need to have the implementation. So if you have a Twitter account, you can implement as you do it. Like I reread Expert Secrets, and I literally had it open. I had it open while I was like typing, and I was like, this is so fucking valuable as a result. Because when these guys tell you to open a spreadsheet and create all your stories and your epiphany stories and your obstacles and your bridges and all this stuff, if you actually do it, again, cause and effect, this will take an impact 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, and you will have like an exponential takeoff, right? But I just think that like most people aren't willing to implement the work, right? Like they'll read the book, but then they'll just fuck the book to the side and say, then blame the book in 6 months now, you know? How do you tighten that feedback loop?
I don't know if there's a way to. I don't think there's any trick here to tighten it. You just you do it. You do it, and you have faith that you're doing the right thing. Because the things that are going to pay off the most for you, they're not going to have a quick feedback. And I think that's by design. Because you want to weed out people looking for an easy way. You want to weed out people who are going to who don't really have what it takes and are just staying around because they got some quick payoff. They got something out of it fast. It's like general fitness, for example. This is why I never thought about this. This comes into view in my head. So general fitness is relatively easy and quick to attain. And that's a good thing, because, all you got to do is get up off the couch for 4 weeks and work out, watch what you eat, and you cut your risk of all-cause mortality in half. If you're like your typical sedentary Westerner. But here's the kicker about this. If you come into it looking for an instant result, it's like you come out like, I worked out 3 days, if you make it that long, and I'm still like, I still got a gut. And I'm like, well, it's not supposed to take that long, but this is a thing that's going to make a huge difference in your life. Like a massive difference. And it takes long. It's about adopting, this is what I'll say. It's about adopting a kind of lifelong pursuit attitude towards these things. Yeah, if I go, all right, man, fitness, like that's what it is. It's lifelong for me. It's not let's diet and then chill. No, it's lifelong, which means creating habits to support and sustain the goal. Writing, back to the idea here, the main idea. Lifelong pursuit to improve. So my pastime is, I like to read. I got a fiction book right here. I got the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the new Hunger Games installment. But I also have right next to it how to lie with statistics, because I was looking through that to catch ideas, and these are on my desk because they're the books I'm reading. But there's a whole bookshelf behind me, and I make reading part of my daily activity, and I make writing part of my daily activity. And it's to the point now where like that's just how it is. Like it's not even like, oh man, I gotta force myself to go write something. Like, no, I'm gonna be creating either way. Very rarely do I go a day without writing. But and then if we draw that parallel to fitness, especially like being a father now, a new father, like I don't have time to get to the gym all the time. but I do have my workout, the little variable resistance bands right here to hit sets in between. I always take the kid for a walk, or always watch what I eat. Like, there are all these things that go together so that, like, while I can't, like, live the life of a pro athlete anymore, I don't have to let my health and fitness go to shit, because I've built in these systems to support me. Same with writing, same with anything that I think is worth doing.
And man, that's the Sahel Bloom, like 30 for 30 approach, like 30 minutes a day, 30 days, you build a habit, and at the end of it, like, you don't recognize it's a habit, right? You just keep on going. And what's interesting here is, like, when you don't do the thing, you then feel weird, right? If I don't go to the gym, I feel weird. Like, I have a day off tomorrow. My coach is like, I need 2 days off a week generally. That's what he wants me to do. And I fucking hate it. I usually end up walking 5 miles on the beach the day that I'm off.
Which is great. Like, that's active recovery. That's excellent.
Yeah. But for me, it's like, it feels weird, right? Because I'm used to getting up, doing a deep work session, heading to the gym, coming back, having some food. So it's almost breaking the pattern, right? Before we wrap up, I love to ask you, like, do you recommend writing a book? Would you recommend people do that?
Ah, man. This is a great question, because I was just having a discussion on LinkedIn with somebody about this. Here is, right now, at this point in my career, what I know, what I would recommend about towards writing a book. If you want to build credibility and an audience in one of the fastest ways, fastest vehicles possible, and you have, I won't say nothing else, because you still need something to write the book about. Write a book, self-publish it, make it a damn good piece of self-published content, which means go out, get the editor, cover design, all that. I'd recommend writing a book, because I can't think of anything easier that produces a faster audience growth result. Now, with that said, when I say faster, building an audience is never an overnight thing. You got to have good content, things to say. Because what a book does is a book makes, assuming it's got a good title, and and like there's like stuff in it. There's like, I think the author's at least remotely interesting. Then it can get you a lot of interviews on podcasts. And I let me tell you, my that was like the thing that really leveraged my growth, is people found not caring what other people like as a superpower. And I was just getting, I for a while, I was inundated with podcasts, guest requests. And each time one dropped, it just went higher and better. As a result, I mean, I punched way above my weight for my audience level. I mean, I was on a knowledge project with Shane Parrish. I was on Modern Wisdom with Chris Williams, the Jordan Harbinger Show, Art of Manliness, Skinny Confidential. These are podcasts with millions of views. And it really helped build me up. Scott Adams had me on a few times, his coffee show. All because of a self-published book. And here's the kicker. That audience made big houses in the publishing world go, oh, okay, this guy can sell books, and he writes already, and he's got this interesting story we can work with. Let's do something here. And so now I'm writing a book for a house. Now, I have no idea what life will look like in 5 years as a result of this book being published. I know what life looked like 5 years after the self-published book, because 5 years after not caring would look like, but 5 years after not caring what other people think is a superpower was 2022. And I know what my life was like then. It was great. And most of it is a shoot off of the stuff I did with that self-published book. It opened a lot of opportunities. It's all about opening opportunity. If you don't have, here's the thing. This is such an interesting topic. So I'm jumping all over the places and my mind tries to figure out. building an audience, you need to have like something unique and interesting. There are like, and the more unique and interesting you are, the easier it is, right? So some guys, have that's one of the reasons why I like Dan Coe, because I can't really tell what that guy is about. Like if I was to dive into his backstory, but he really beat the system into the dirt with the way he's grown his following, and it's really impressive. Like I say that is being really impressed, but it's saying from what it sounds like though, watching his content is that I think he hasn't talked about it, but he's got something that really trained him in the art of thinking. I love it, but maybe it's just writing. But on the main idea here, if you don't have something unique about you that you can build around, a book is really going to help if you're a good writer and you can like position that. Or rather, man, I keep editing myself. Yes, you should write a book. That's the answer. I think everyone should write a book. To sum that up, your expectations of it should be directly reflected in what you could do if you had not wrote a book. There you go. There's a great way to sum everything up.
I think a good way to look at it is that like when you've done a thing and you have experience, when you have experience and you could be perceived as an expert, or you want to be perceived as an expert, a book is a good play. But if you're going from zero, I would actually suggest a podcast, because a podcast can give you the audience, it can give you the reach, it can give you the learning lessons to go and be the person that you actually want to be, and the education, which is basically what I did. I started when I was 24. I was literally knew nothing, and I just slowly built up 200 and 210 episodes in, to the point that I was able to build a business because of what I've learned from my podcast, and then be able to like share those lessons with people to get to the point where by now that pulls in people as a result. Do you get me? Just because it's just like seeing the journey and seeing the progress. So it's almost like it's like another way to do it from a different lens. Because like everyone's telling you to like post on LinkedIn, right? But like the reason I asked you that is because your perspective on it is like it's a different angle, and I think a podcast is a different angle too. And that's the reason why so much people crush it, right? And people like you come to it. So yeah, man, I want to say a big thank you. It's when you release the podcast, when you release the second book, let's do the second episode in person. We'll do it in America.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun, man. I'm all for it.
I'd love that, man. I would love to do it in person. I've seen a few of the ones you've done in person.
I ain't never been to Bali, so we'll see. So
if you want to come for a bit of a trip, you can make the most of it, man. But yeah, man, I want to say big thank you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, man. I really appreciate you.